Hello again, and welcome to the St. Louis Blues Hockey Legends Podcast. Tom Calhoun here to shine a light on the stories of those instrumental in blues history. And many thanks to the blues talented organist Jeremy Boyer for setting the stage with his keyboard magic. Visit him at Jabs Music on X. The guest on this episode is one of the great goalies of all time and Blues Hall of Famer Mike Liut. Mike is also the player agent for Blues goalie Jordan Binnington. More on that in this episode, too. The Legends Podcast is sponsored in part by the organization I work for in the summer months, the Gateway Grizzlies. They tell me they're planning a Tom Calhoun bobblehead night in the coming season. More on that after a portion of my chat with the great Mike Liut. But first, let's examine his resume. Mike was a standout college hockey player for 4 seasons at Bowling Green University. After turning pro, he spent 2 seasons with the Cincinnati Stingers of the World Hockey Association. Mike arrived in St. Louis in the National Hockey League, ready to step in and contribute. He immediately took over the starting duties for the Blues and made a major impact, playing 64 games and posting a record of 32, 23, and 9. His second season saw him improve and become arguably the top goaltender in the league, posting a record of 33, 14, and 13. He was traded by the Blues in 1985 in what was thought of as a money-saving move by then-owner Harry Arnest. He finished his career with 6 seasons with the Hartford Whalers and 3 more with the Washington Capitals. He posted the league's best goals against average in 1989-90. And he was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame with the 2024 class. So let's drop the puck now with the great Mike Liut. And this time around, our episode features the great Mike Liut, and we're so glad that Mike could spare some time for us on this episode of the Blues Hockey Legends. Mike, welcome aboard. Thanks for your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Tom. Always fun to talk to the people of St. Louis.
Yeah, and they are, I'm sure, going to be excited to hear about some of the accomplishments of Mike Liut that maybe have gotten a little bit farther in the rearview mirror than they should. That's part of the mission of our podcast is to get the younger fan base up to speed on some of our good blues history. So let's start with Mike Liut's early life, your family background, your home, mom, dad, sisters, brothers, all of that sort of thing. Tell us more about how you grew up and where you grew up.
Well, I grew up just outside of the city of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. It was a very rural area, even though it was within a mile of the Toronto city limits. We had 3 ponds, that bordered the back of our subdivision. And depending on how many kids you had to shovel the ponds, that's the one you played on. And I think I wound up playing more pond hockey than I actually did ice hockey, because that's just how it was, back then. It isn't the manic race to the rink 5 days a week or 6 days a week that these kids have endured. So mine did as well, but it was very rural. Saturday morning, you left the house after breakfast and you came back sometime around noon when you were hungry. And then when your mother would stand on the stoop and scream for you to come home for dinner. But it was a lot of fun, a lot of outdoor activity.
Yeah, kids could go their own way and do what they wanted to do with their time a lot more back in those days. I remember those too. So what was your family structure like? Mom, dads, brothers, sisters, etc.?
Yeah, we had a family of 6. I have 2 older siblings and a younger sibling. We're actually all 4 years apart. Don't know, kind of peculiar that way, but grew up. My father was immigrated to Canada when he was 7 or 8 years old. That was like 1928 or 29, from northern Italy. Grew up with classic Italian background, except for the language, unfortunately. But it was a 1960s upbringing, right? There wasn't a lot of opinion in the household. There was one opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe one and a half. Well, there was one opinion depending on what it was, right? They controlled their own part of the household, and there wasn't a lot of discussion about what it was. But yeah, it was just very middle class type of existence. My dad was a construction superintendent, ran construction jobs. We worked in the summer and played hockey and baseball, and really quite unremarkable, right? It wasn't uh, the today with all of the activities. You found your own activity, and you found it in the neighborhood with the other kids. If you had 3 or 4 kids, you could create a baseball game. You could play, street hockey, and it seemed to revolve around a lot of sports. But we had the luxury, literally, of having, an area. We had maybe, I don't know, 30 homes in our street. They're all an acre parcel, and we had twice as much land around them that was wild, and it was a remarkable playground for the kids. And as you said, it was a safer environment, and the worst you could do is you climbed a little too high in a tree, which could be interesting getting down, but you got up there, you figured out how to get down.
And it's good to have an Ontario guy on the podcast. I've had all these Western Canada guys on with Unger and Chase and Federico and Berenson, who are, all Western guys. What do you think the difference in the way you approach the sport is between the Western and Eastern Canada guys?
Well, when I in that era, the guys from the West, they took outdoor living to another level, right? We played at it, they worked at it. A lot of them came off the farm, they had responsibilities, daily. It was a long way between games. A lot of them left home when they were 15 years old to play junior hockey, or 16. And it was a tough road to hoe. They were they brought an element of physical to the game that was not in Ontario, or as much in Ontario. I mean, the league, the Western Junior League, was it spread out over, I don't know, maybe 1,500 miles that they traveled, long bus trips, and they were tough customers, right? As we've seen, and our team in St. Louis was, we had a lot of Westerners with Bernie and Brian, Wayne Babbage, Perry Turnbull, and a host of other guys that came from the West, and all came from that background.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. Even though you said your home was rather rural, but you were kind of part of that Toronto metroplex, I guess, to some degree. So you were kind of more of a city guy compared to those guys, huh?
Well, way more, in that sense. It was, when I played junior B hockey, I played in Markham, which was just outside of Toronto when I was 15, and we practiced once a week. We were owned by the family that owned the Leafs. They owned the Toronto Marlies, which would be the equivalent in the OHA, I guess, at that time, compared to so our practices once a week were at Maple Leaf Gardens. The guys that I played with, the first time they saw an NHL game in person was the one they were playing in. Right. So it was different. And, when you live in the West, and I don't think things have changed maybe that much, but, in terms of the climate, but it's dangerous out there. You drive to a game and you break down on the road, you better have supplies, because, it's no joke out there. You can freeze to death. So it's, it's just that's a different type of rural living than what we were talking about.
I moved on from family a little bit too soon. Talk about your current family situation a little bit. Who's important to you at this point in your life?
Well, we have our immediate family. We've got Mary Ann, who's from Carlisle, Illinois. That's our anchor, right?
Yeah, good for you.
And she's so we have older, daughter and two sons. Time's marching on when your middle son is middle child's age 40.
Yeah, yeah. I know a
So
little bit about that.
yeah, so no, that's and then so we have our the Donald side of Mary Ann's family is still in Carlisle, Breeze, and we're very close to that side of the family in St. Louis.
So you get back here quite often
Quite often, right? Yeah, it's so there's that's our my mother-in-law will turn 100 this
wow,
August.
good for her.
So so we're looking forward to that. Elmina Donwald. That's going to be a big event.
You bet.
And I always tell people the great thing about my mother-in-law is she still has an older sister.
No kidding. Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. My mother made it to 98, and she didn't come close to the 100 yet, but we were pretty proud of her to get into 98.
Yeah, my mother was 98 too. So so that's great. My family is still in Ontario. They're a little bit further away, but or not that far away. They're a couple hours, 2-3 hours drive from us. But everybody with big families and moving and covering a lot of ground. Grandkids now, so we do have a couple of grandkids, little ones, very little. One's going to be 7 months old and a 3-year-old, almost 4. So we've got our hands full with that. Love them to death, and they're a lot of fun. Keeps you young.
You bet, absolutely. And home now for you is in the Detroit area.
Yeah, it has been since I retired. I had an opportunity to come to. I had an opportunity to stay with the Players Association. I was quite involved at the end of my career when I was playing in Hartford and Washington. There was a lot of change happening in the NHL. The economics were taking some big strides at that time, and I had the plan was I did attend law school here in Detroit, and the Players Association was contemplating moving the labor department to Detroit, and that's why I went to law school here. That didn't work out, but law school did, and that's where we've been here ever since. So it's been over 30 years now.
Yeah, and you've got a really nice career as an agent going. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but tell us about how you got exposed to the game of hockey. I imagine you already talked about pond hockey, but when did it get more serious for you in your life?
Well, growing up in Canada, it was, I guess, something that a lot of people do, not everybody. But for me, it was a kind of a natural process. We had Woodbridge had its own community center, ice arena, and I started playing when I was 5 years old. It was very nondescript. It was just house league hockey, and then squirts and peewees, and it was with 6 teams in the league. It wasn't something that anybody grew up talking about playing in the NHL, right? It was something you wanted to do, possibly, but it wasn't. It was off on the horizon. There was one hockey game a week, Saturday night, and it was a quiet dream if you had one. And for me, it was. We had a dinner at the end of a banquet at the end of each season for our town, and the commissioner of the league was talking about that idea of playing in the NHL, and he said 1 out of every, I don't know the number, I don't know the denominator, but the numerator definitely was 1. And I remember it being a shock to me, because in my heart of hearts, I was going to play in the NHL. And I was taken aback by that, the odds. And I quickly came to the conclusion that he didn't say zero. There is one out of, and so why not? Why can't I be one? I'll be the one. And I distinctly have that memory, that dinner, that talk. And it was the last anyone ever, or I ever talked about it, right? Like, it wasn't something that you talked about, I'm going to do this. It was just either if you're going to do it, go and do it. Yeah. The rest of it was really, I don't want to say a fluke. It wasn't a fluke, but I had a lot of really good things happen that were quite fortuitous. And my dad was playing golf one day with, I was 15 years old, and a young man that he happened to get paired with was, his name was Bobby Delavis, and he was playing hockey at Michigan Tech at the time. And he had played at Markham, and he told my dad that there was this tryout, because Markham was outside the Toronto Metro. It was in the Metro Junior B League. And Markham was the only team outside of the city. So they always had like a pre-camp for the kids outside the city. So my dad just took me to the tryout. At the time I was 6 feet tall, or 6'1". This was a junior B team for the junior A team that was owned by the Toronto Maple Leafs, that, ownership. So there was a reason to have younger players. And I happened to make that team. I didn't play a lot, but we had myself, the other goalie was Mike Palmatier, Bruce Boudreau played on that team, Dennis Murrock. We had another guy that nobody remembers is Tommy Edyer, who played in the WHA, played in Pittsburgh for a couple of years, and just retired, I think, before he was 25, and just went off and did something else. But he was a tremendous player. And 3 or 4 other guys that dabbled around the WHA and so forth. So, that was a, I don't know how those things happened, but I had 4 or 5 other instances like that shaped my career. Right. And so, it got, serious for me at 15, really 16. The following year I played, junior again, and then I was in college, and, it rolled forward. But I can pick out 3 or 4 moments, people I met, coaches I played for, all lined up and made me a better player, better athlete, provided an opportunity, that all led to the NHL.
So based on your story there about the odds that somebody told you had, you must have had an idea pretty early on that you were cut out and had the physical and mental approach, I guess, to the sport to be successful at it.
It wasn't that. It wasn't that I was better than anybody else, or that I had shown that I was going to do that, or at least I thought that. I just wanted to do it. That's what I wanted to do. I'm going to do that, right? And the rest of it is you just play. There was Jim Kite, played in the NHL for a number of years, defenseman, mostly with Winnipeg, and he wrote a story after he retired, and this has to be close to 20 years ago. And he was talking about the changes in youth hockey at the time, and the push where essentially we're now playing hockey because it's going to lead somewhere, right? It's going to lead to a scholarship, or it's going to lead to a career, or lead to riches, or whatever it is. And the gist of his story was, you just play, and you play at your different levels, right? You touch all the stones as you're moving up through your age groups. And one day you wake up and you're in the NHL. And that's how it works. It still works that way.
Right.
You don't manufacture NHL players. They create themselves, in the sense that they have a drive to get there, and they put in the requisite work, and they learn the game, and they learn how to play at each level, which, you could be a scorer in college or junior, but a checker in the NHL. Right. And that's not everybody's going to be. Everybody in the NHL comes from a fairly heightened place when junior or college. They weren't the fourth line guy in college, that sort of thing. So it was in many ways easier for me, to get there. There was only 17 teams and it was easier. We have a worldwide game now, and 32 teams, but the pressure, and I didn't feel any pressure to achieve anything. I just wanted to do it, and in my mind, that's what was going to happen. But it wasn't easy, certainly. But it wasn't like all I did was when I was turning pro, graduated from Bowling Green, and I was playing golf with my dad, and we were leaving the golf course, and I in a moment of I don't know, clarity, or when I said, "Hey, Dad, what if I'm not good enough to play in the NHL? What if I'm not good enough to make it?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I hope you're man enough to look in the mirror and admit it and get on with the rest of your life, because it doesn't matter how good you are or how long you play, there will be the rest of your life. You're not going to do this forever. So just, essentially go and do it or not and move on." Yeah. So, it was, one of those things where, there's a little bit of that blissful naivete, right? Of, I guess I'll just go play now. Right. And there wasn't this surge or the only thing I said to myself quietly was that if I wasn't in the NHL in 3 years, then it would be time to move on. And, when I started in the WHA because the Solomon family had walked away from the Blues franchise at that time. They didn't participate in the 77 entry draft. I was drafted in 1976. And I don't know. I wanted to play hockey next year. I just didn't know where. So Cincinnati had acquired my rights in the WHA.
2 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I played there for the last 2 years. And then, and life is ironic, strange how things work out. In the middle of my first year, I was struggling. I had a bad knee. I had cartilage surgery and missed 6 weeks. And when I came back, we had traded for Pat Stapleton, who was a terrific hockey player. Little guy, played defense, played in Chicago, 6-team league. Yeah, really brilliant. And one of the first guys, or the first individual, who really had thought about the game of hockey and making it, not making it, sort of the psychology of hockey. Mm-hmm. And he was my roommate, for the last half of my first year. And I use so many of the things that he said to me with my clients as they're breaking into the game. And at the time, we had 4 guys on the team from college. We were the generation after Red Berenson, but the NHL had not accepted us any more than they accepted, his generation. Mm-hmm. And this was 1977. Jacques Demers was the coach in Cincinnati. And the first time he saw a hockey game was the 1984 Bowling Green, Minnesota Duluth final on replay, right on tape. And he came up to me in 1984. Now, I played for him in 1977. And he said, "Hey, Mike, I watched the hockey game. That's good hockey." So you can only imagine what he thought of me in 1970, or the league, or the, where I came from. So anyway, Pat dropped this on me one day. We were talking about this, and I was, I'd made the team, and I was started to struggle. Then I got hurt. Now I'm coming back. And he said, "Mike, everybody in hockey will give you a reason why you should fail. It's just up to you whether you listen to them or not. No, whether you believe them or not. Just up to you whether you believe them or not." And in hockey, you're too slow, too dumb, too not brave enough, can't score, can't. Hockey has a tendency to see people, when we scout it, to see what they can't do instead of what they can do. Tell me what he can do. I can tell you whether he can play or not.
Right.
Right. So, that was just another huge part of my story that doesn't get talked about very often, right? About that generation of players, and St. Louis had them. I didn't play with them, but there was Red and certainly Bark and Bobby.
Right.
Bark was very much like that. But Bark was, I could talk a lot about Bark, right? And how there's Bob. Everybody knows Bobby, but Bark was just one of the very, very best people I've ever met in hockey.
Yeah, Bernie was on with us the last time we did one of these, and he pretty much said the same thing. He came to camp with a bad ankle, and they sent him to the minors, and he said, I wasn't great. I wasn't excited about that because of the fact I was a first-round draft pick. But he said, I went down to the minors, and I got to play with Barclay Plager, and he said that just set me on a whole different path. So
yeah. Well,
let's talk about your Blues experience a little bit. We've already mentioned a couple of years with Cincinnati and the WHA. Then you come to the Blues, and right off the bat, you're starting goalie, and you're lighting it up. You had two great seasons right off the bat, and you're on that 80-81 Blues team with Fedorko and Sutter and Babbage and Pedersen and Perry Turnbull and Zook and all those guys. And that was one of the better teams the Blues have ever had. And Bernie, like I mentioned, was on last time with us, and he said he thought if that team got stuck, could have stayed together, it could have really been one of the better teams of all time.
We had a remarkable season. I looked it up this year, and I've forgotten already. I used to say there were 7 20-goal scorers. I think there was 10 or 11 players that scored 20 goals.
Yeah.
So we were the fourth highest. I think that was right at the time. Fourth highest scoring team of all time in the NHL. And I got an inordinate amount of credit that year because that's how goaltending runs. If you win, you're great, and if you don't, not so great.
Right.
But yes, it was a team that found ways to win. We had I quickly get to the playoffs, and that didn't work out where it should have. And that to me was as much circumstance as anything else. We had a lot of things, some injuries, 5-game series against Pittsburgh. Those games were played in 7 nights, which is barbaric to say the least. Plus overtime, and then you have one day off and play another 4 and 5 in the second round. And the second game in St. Louis, the power went out in the building all day, and it was April. It was 80 degrees. By the time they started the game, I was 190 pounds every day of my hockey career. Right? When I came to St. Louis, Leo Boyven used to balance the scale at training camp. When somebody would complain that the scale was heavy, he would yell for me to come and get on the scale. And if it said 190 pounds, the scale
right.
was right. We didn't have a weight. We didn't have 25-pound weight to balance the scale, so they used me. So at the end of that second game, this is back-to-back, against the Rangers, I weighed out after the game at 178 pounds. And I can remember sitting there after the game just going, I can't drink anything. I can't eat anything. I can't even move. Like today, I'd have an IV between periods, right? Mm-hmm. Then it was one day off and play another 2 in 2. So, we ran out of steam. I ran out of gas, I guess. And it was a bitter end to a really terrific season. But in today's playoff format, where it's every other game, it's a different story.
Right. Sure. We're talking with Mike Liut. The great Mike Liut, and of course, Blues Hall of Famer in that 2024 class. Well, during your sixth season with the Blues, Mike, you were traded to the Hartford Whalers in exchange for Greg Millen and Mark Johnson. Timing of the deal was pretty odd because the Blues were in first place in the Norris division at the time, and I guess we all wondered what the deal was with that deal, and I guess it was a Harry Ornest money saver if you look back on it. Do you believe that?
Well, you know, yeah, well, of course they do. It was also a moneymaker because Ron Carrunt told me they got $400,000 or $500,000 in the deal too.
Well, there you go.
Right. And unfortunately he told me at Wick's wedding. I don't know our wedding, sorry, at Wick's funeral. Right. And I didn't, Doug, yeah. And that, I didn't, that always struck me as weirder than the trade, that he would tell me that there, that I cared. I mean, we're all retired, right? I mean, it was water under the bridge a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's all part of the game, right? You just, management changes, coaches change, players change. We've even seen teams change, right? So I wasn't particularly thrilled about it. I can remember there's a few moments in your career and your life where you know where you were and what you were thinking. That was one of them. I was, went from first place to out of the playoffs with a morning phone call. Even though, the trade deadline, there's still season there. And, you look at the ceiling and you try to figure out how the hell did we get here, right? But hey, that's life, right? So we're right back to either you're going to go and play or you're not, right? There's two options, and Emile Francis, as everybody, Mr. Francis, as we all called him,
yeah,
and he was in Hartford, and he made the trade. That wasn't a shocker, but it was even that year. Red, back to the people around you that have an impact on your life. Sometimes they have to tell you what you aren't looking at or recognizing. And we played in Detroit one night, and I knew he would be. He was coaching at Michigan, and I knew he would have stopped in to see Bark because Bark was sick, and
right.
And so I poked my head into the bar at the hotel, which of course was always off limits to the players. And
right.
And sure enough, Red was in there. I just wanted to go and say hello because I had not seen Red, since he was fired. He, in true fashion of that generation, wanted to sit down and talk to me about where I was in my career. And he told me I was going to get traded. Everybody knows you're going to get traded. They're going to get rid of the money, but whatever it is. He said, you've priced yourself out of St. Louis. Something like that. He either said priced or played yourself out of St. Maybe he said played. But at any rate, he started off by asking me, how long was I going to play? And I remember distinctly saying something cheeky like, well, hopefully until May, right, in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's not what he was talking about. And I was 29, just turned 29 at the time. And he went on to reprimand me, scold me, actually, about, this is the greatest time to play hockey. There's no more surprises. You've climbed the mountaintop. Now, how long are you going to stick around? And here's the end. And you need to get your game back to where it is because people in the league don't look at you the way they should be, and because you're not playing the way they expect you to play, right? So that's sometimes, the hard reality that athletes have to listen to.
That was a kick in the pants. Huh?
Yeah, and that was it. It wasn't much after that. I looked up the date when I wrote the article about Finner, and I've forgotten it already, February, whatever. But the other part to that story was I was in St. Louis, in Hartford. I've been there for a week or so, and we were playing the Blues. And I didn't play that game at home in Hartford. And Barkley I was taking my time getting out of the dressing room, and Bark held the bus, right? The Blue guys are all on the bus. They're ready to go. And Barkley needed to talk to me. And I kind of wandered out of the dressing room, and he just wanted to know, A, was I okay? How was the family? And 3, make sure you got to play, right? I think he said, pull your head out of somewhere, and you got to, and it's time to get on with it, right? This is reality. Deal with it. And he just wanted to make sure I knew that, and and I was going to be okay and get back out there and play and compete and get on with it, right? And I assured him that I was okay, and he said, okay, fine. And he got on the bus, and then they left. But he held the bus until I walked out because he wanted to make sure I was okay.
And you were on another team by then, and he didn't have to do that. Yeah.
No, he definitely didn't have to do that.
But
he did have to do it because that generation, that's exactly how they were. And
you look out for one another.
Yeah. I mean, they're Gordie Howe was the same way. Bobby Hall was the same way. Mm-hmm. I got to know them in the WHA. And when I was in St. Louis, I was introduced and got to know Stan Musial. And I always say Gordie Howe, Stan Musial, exactly the same human being.
Wow. Well, right. So, Stan was my hero as a kid and still is, of course. But and I compared Bernie to Stan and to some degree in my last podcast, similar type caring individual. Yeah. I want to take a brief time out here to tell you about the Gateway Grizzlies. They are always providing family fun at their baseball park in Sauget. It's Grizzlies Ballpark, and it means fun for the entire family. It's family-oriented, and that means the pricing is family-oriented, too. And they tell me they're going to do a Tom Calhoun bobblehead coming up on May the 16th. That's opening night of the upcoming Frontier League season. So I hope you'll make plans to be there and get yourself a Calhoun bobblehead. That's going to be quite the item for everybody's man cave, right? Go to GatewayGrizzlies.com and find out about the upcoming season schedule and all the wonderful promotional nights they have, including the greatest night in baseball. You don't want to miss that on Labor Day weekend. GatewayGrizzlies.com. So you were a college player. You mentioned Bowling Green. College hockey has become much more important in the scheme of things these days to the NHL. I assume you feel like your college experience was a good one.
Certainly a good one. I had, again, I'll come back to it. I was recruited by Jack Vivian, who left that summer before I was a freshman, to become the general manager of the Cleveland franchise in the WHA. And his replacement was Ron Mason. And Ron went on to become the winningest coach in college hockey history. So, which that record has been eclipsed by Jerry York, but that is one terrific stroke of good luck, because Ron introduced everybody to a different level of intensity and expectation and accountability. And as a 17-year-old, that's a formative experience for me.
Sure.
So, yes, it was. We had a terrific team. We were in the Central Collegiate Hockey Association, along with the St. Louis Billikens and Ohio State. We were the redheaded stepchild. I don't know if you can say that anymore, but we were the odd one out. And you had the ECAC, which were the Eastern schools, and the WCHA, and those two schools or two conferences, the top two teams played in the Final Four for the national championship, and there was no wiggle room. And Bowling Green had hockey for 5 years as a Division I sport. And when Ron took over, by the end of my sophomore year, we were top 10 in the country. And he recruited well, but he recruited players that were good hockey players, hardworking hockey players, not NHL quality hockey players except for Kenny Morrow. And we had a tremendous group of individuals that played for each other that really epitomized team and had just more fun than a college student should have or be allowed to have.
Bowling Green State, yeah. My oldest son, spent some time in that neck of the woods for a while after his college days. Nice area. Let's talk about your client, Mr. Binnington, for a few minutes. Most people know, I think, you're Binner's agent. He goalies are much bigger these days than they were in your days. Even you're not a small guy, and Binner's not a small guy either. But we tend to see these 6'6", 6'7" guys around the league these days, and Binner's doing pretty good for a smaller goaltender, I would say.
Yeah, he's 6'3". Yeah, I used to always think at 6'2", I always thought that the 5'11" guys were more in the net, and I was up out of the net a little bit. It has little to nothing to do with stature. At some point, too small is too small, but at some point, too big is too big, because pucks do get underneath them, and they are just, their knees are further away. So the game is played in all shapes and sizes, and Henrik Lundqvist is, I don't know, they listed him at 6'2". He's not taller than me, and I'm not 6'2" anymore. I'm a shrinking 6'2". So yeah, Binner's doing he's doing well. I think his game has it's matured over the last few years. He was sensational when they won the Stanley Cup, but it's the test of time, and it's the year in and year out, and everything that goes into that equation. It takes a lot to show up every year and play 50, 60 games and be successful, and a lot of it, as I said before, when it's going well, you'll get too much credit. When it's not going as well, you'll get an inordinate amount of the blame, or they'll point to the goaltending, and that's just the nature of the beast, right? There's two people on a team whose name gets tattooed with the win-loss percentage, and that's the goalie and the coach. Yeah. And they carry the same pressure of having to win, right? There's only the end of the game, and whether you had one or more goals than the opponent, that's it. So it's a lot to manage.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I said it's a lot to manage, but Jordan does a really good job of managing that and leveling out the highs and lows.
Seems like a really smart guy and level-headed guy. Have you given him any goaltending pointers, or you stay on the business side of it?
One of the first clients I had was that I recruited and represented was Ryan Miller, and Ryan, they all have their own private coaches. They have a team coach, and I always tell them, the last thing you need is another coach, right? And there's only one time in his career that I said anything to him about goaltending, and I prefaced it. It happened to be in St. Louis when I caught up to him, and I preface it by saying we've never talked about actually playing the game and how to play it, but he had gotten into a rut where he was trying to be more of a blocker than an active athletic player, and he kind of agreed immediately, and that was it. So it's not the technical part of the game, but the mental part of the game that doesn't get taught, and in many cases can't be taught by the people coaching because they weren't there, and that's just the reality of it. And as I said, it's difficult to manage the day-to-day, year in, year out, duties of playing goal and being successful and winning and managing, because you're managing the team, or at least if you're not managing it, you have to be acutely aware of what's going on in the dressing room. So there's all of those things that the mental side of it. Like in golf, they say it's a 5-inch game. The 5 inches between your ears. It's kind of the same way with goaltending. right? Like there you can get lost in your analysis, and that's never a good thing.
Well, Binner, opened a lot of eyes, I think, in a positive way during that Four Nations tournament recently. And it seemed to me that there was some unfair analysis of his being the number one goaltender for the Canadian team. And I think he's changed some minds about his value. I'm guessing you would agree with that.
Well, at the end of the tournament, and it's a short sample size, right? So let's not get carried away with it, but it's a high profile, high stakes, and made even more so at that time, politically, which is unfortunate always. But the stripping it down, my text to him at the end of the tournament was, congratulations. And you just reminded everybody in hockey why, in significant part, the Blues won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So, and that's what Jordan is quite capable of playing. That game, that moment, he's good at it.
Yeah, he certainly accepts the challenge and gave me a chance to wear this shirt that I'm wearing for the podcast today, the
right.
Stanley Cup champion shirt. And I made sure I had a photo with Binner on the stage after the Stanley Cup parade because, he brought a lot of joy to a lot of people back in 2019. So, he's going to be under contract with the Blues for another couple of years. Well, what do you see his future down the road being?
Beyond 2 years, or when his hockey career is over?
We'd like to see him stick around in St. Louis for another.
Yeah, I think sure. Here's I'm not going to talk about other sports. I don't know the players in other leagues and so forth. And it's not better, it's not worse. They're just my experiences with hockey players, and that's it. Hockey players generally don't look to move teams. That's not the go-to move, right? And maybe it's cultural, but it's cultural in most other sports too. In that you get drafted by a team, that drafted, the team that drafts you, that crest is somewhere indelibly tattooed on your heart, right? It just is. And that's always, there's always an identity with the team that drafted you. In today's world, my world, there was never the opportunity to change teams, and that maybe lasted longer than in some other sports. But and players certainly do change teams, and that part of the business has kind of balanced out. But it's still an athlete, and maybe I should preface it with athletes rather than a sport. Athletes, you're always looking to remove the anxiety, to remove the distractions, and focus on just playing the game. Changing teams is a distraction, and you're starting all over again. It isn't easy, right? And it isn't easier. It doesn't get any easier the older you get. Yet we all have to do it. Many times when you get to the end of your career and teams are looking to change their lineup, maybe acquire an asset they don't have, and they're going to trade somebody whose asset value is going to diminish all the way down to zero in the next couple of years, right? So that you just accept that you're going to get shown the door at some point near the end of your career. But it isn't a go-to move. Now, in today's game, where people become more accustomed to moving around, then you look at your career and say, I've got one or two more chances at a Stanley Cup. That tends to drive the decisions. And you look at a player like Ray Bourque. Ray is just one of the very great players of all time, right? Sure. And particularly at his position. And he ran it all the way out in Boston until there was just no more opportunity to win, and there's nothing on the horizon. And they traded him to Colorado, and he won. And that's like, everybody looked at that as good for Ray, right? He deserves to win one, right? And not only deserves, he should win one with the career he had, that sort of thing. So with Binner, you can't look into the future. That's the greatest distraction for an athlete. Your boots are here, and your mind has to be here, wherever that is. And the Blues are on a tremendous run right now, and you have to love the way they're playing. I mean, I said that 80-81, we had all these, the scoring on our team was all-time highs. And when the Blues won the Stanley Cup, I mentioned to Doug Armstrong, I think it might be the greatest team win in the history of the Stanley Cup, with that lineup. Wow. And who they had and how they played together. I thought, I think we represented, at Octagon, we represented 7 players on that hockey team. And, one of them was Alex Steen. And I've told Alex this, so it's not, I thought, he went from a different spot at the beginning of the year to playing with Barbashev, and
he bought into a lesser role on the team.
And he was a tremendous leader at that time. He played. I remember distinctly. I think it was game 6 or 4 or 6 that we were there. It was the game's hanging in the balance, and the Bruins are on a power play, and they got 2 guys in front of the net, and the puck comes back to the defenseman, who blasted from the puck, and Steen stuck out his toe and knocked it down with the side of his foot. Let me tell you, that hurts.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it was about the 3rd blocked shot he had that game from just like that, right? I mean, if it gets behind him, Binner's not going to control that rebound. It's not high enough to catch. It's like, who knows, right? Just who knows. And just the way they played, the way that Craig had them playing, I just thought that they were all on the same page, and just totally deserved to win the cup. And that's the essence of playing sports, team sports, right there, right? When you can get everybody playing for each other, that is high praise.
It certainly was fun for all of us who've spent a lot of time either working with or for the Blues, or cheering for them too. Well, I asked this, Mike, of all the legends on this podcast, and I'll ask you, how would you like to be remembered? What is the Mike Liut legacy?
Wow. I always thought legacies and accolades were for somebody else to write. I know what I'd like to be remembered as, and then I'm always questioning myself whether I lived up to that standard to be remembered that way. But I don't have, it's not important in that sense, I guess. I don't know if that's just age and reflection, but I'd like to say that he put as much as he had into the game, but I know that there were times in my career where I didn't, right? I came up short, like, maybe most people, but I can't get past the things that I didn't do to get to the things that I think I should be remembered by. And I leave it at that, right? I'll be different to different people in terms of what they saw, how I played when I played with them. I think I showed up every night, and I think showing up, if you do it over, I have almost 60 games, 10 years in a row. I showed up every night. I can't, sometimes I didn't bring it all, but it's hard to reflect for me. I think everything, my brother, when I was inducted in the St. Louis Blues Hall of Fame, I was with Bernie, and he said, "How many Hall of Fames are you in?" And I said, "I think 4 or 5." And he said, "I think I'm in 7." I said, "Yeah, but you're in the one that counts." And my brother does it every time I'm inducted into a Hall of Fame at some point. My brother can't wait to get on the phone, my younger brother, and tell me, he said, congratulations, you're still in every Hall of Fame except the one that counts.
The one in Toronto.
The one in Toronto. So, those are, but for me, it's not about that. It's about, and I've said this many times, it's about winning and not having won.
Mm-hmm.
What's the talk about? So that's probably not a healthy way to look at yourself, but hey, I'm good. The next birthday starts with a 7, and I can't stop thinking about not winning. So I just smile and move on.
All right. Well, that's a long answer to a simple question, but we'll take it. That's the way it is. And you told me, I think, on the phone when we were setting this up, that you're thinking about stepping away from working, I guess, and doing what you do.
Well, I think that we all have to look down the road and say, when are we no longer useful, right? I've already done this once with a hockey career.
Yeah.
Right now, what I like the most about what I do is that you don't feel your age. I don't recognize my age until I shave in the morning. Then it's staring me in the face. But I really have enjoyed being around players. It's a world that I'm familiar with, and I don't think it's the skills and the equipment changes, but how to play the game remains the same, and the winning and losing, the elements of that are always going to be the same. So I like playing. I like being around the players and watching them go through all the trials and tribulations that we did. But so we keep doing it until you just decide you're not going to do it, or for me, it'll be when I just don't feel that I'm contributing enough, and it's time to move on and maybe do something else. I always tease my boss that I've had 2 careers. I need a third career. I'm still looking for a third career.
I've had a number of them my whole life, and I'm still looking for another one myself. So I understand the mental approach to that. Well, Mike, thanks so much for giving us so much time today. I do appreciate it, and I know our fans of this podcast will really appreciate it as well and enjoy it very much. So all the best to you. Congratulations on the Blues Hall of Fame and all you mean to Blues Nation.
Tom, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed it, and good luck with the remaining legends on your podcast.
Okay. Thanks for being with me for episode 12 with the great Mike Liut. We'll have bonus material with Mike available soon, along with some of our previous Legends guests. Visit PAGuyTom.com or BluesHockeyLegends.com and sign up for our Legends email notifications and the latest info. The Legends podcast is also available now at ScoopsWithDannyMac.com. Video of the podcast is published the Monday after the Friday release of the audio. As always, please like and share on Facebook, X, and Instagram, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. It all keeps the Legends podcast alive and well. Tom Calhoun here saying thanks for being a fan, and let's go Blues!